So it's interesting to see what people were saying the previous week about Mario and Luigi Brothership and the lower than expected sales for some people at least, and some kind of equating that to, oh, the Nintendo Switch is on its way out. They don't really have anything big this year, but I was saying, let's wait. There is one massive game that's going to rack up a lot of sales on the Nintendo Switch that's still coming out, and that game obviously proved true to be Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake. It also proves exactly what I'm saying about an upcoming Dragon Quest game and what Square Enix wants to do with that. I think that this is clear as day what is happening based off of these sales. A lot of times some people get a little bit upset when I go over certain updates, and trust me guys, when it comes to the whole Dragon Quest update, I'll make sure to kind of title it a little bit better going forward. But for this one, this is why it's so important to kind of look at the sales numbers, and those can provide some interesting updates for us, because this is going to shape what's going to happen with the future. They follow where the money is. So what games you get and how you get them and where you get them is shaped by things like this that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to help you guys break it down today and what exactly it means. But before we get into that, what's good everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell to get my videos first. And let's go ahead and jump right into this, because we have the Famitsu Sales for November 11th, 2024 through November 17th, 2024. And the big news this week, especially for Dragon Quest fans, is Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake and the debut sales numbers for that, and how it's going to affect the future for Square Enix, future Dragon Quest titles, future HD-2D titles, and just more overall. So Famitsu has published the estimated numbers here for that week, and Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake, surprise, surprise, highest selling new release of the week, opening up at a staggering 641,195 units on the Nintendo Switch alone, not including digital sales. None of this includes digital at all, guys. Just make sure I put that out there. And another 180,575 units on the PlayStation 5 for an opening week total of 821,770 retail copies sold. Now, if you include digital, where Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake is #1 in a lot of regions and absolutely #1 in Japan, obviously that is over 1 million units for Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake in its first number of days on the market. Now, this is another interesting thing that happened last week, and I gave my analysis saying that I don't really think that PlayStation 5 Pro sales debuted in Japan were that impressive. It lined up a little bit better than what we saw with the PlayStation 4 Pro, but at the same time, software wasn't up. If you looked at the top 30 sales, it wasn't like there was a bunch of people buying software to take advantage of the system, and it seemed like more people were probably doing the whole exporting thing in terms of the PS5 Pro hardware, which we've seen before in Japan, where people are just exporting to different parts of Asia. And it looks like that analysis was correct, because hardware-wise, Switch sold another 62,158 units, not a bad week at all, but the PS5 family only sold around 23,672 units, so it was a huge dip, over 50,000 unit plus dip from one week to the next week, which tells me that it's not necessarily the Japanese people rushing out there to be excited to buy it like some were saying, and it's more of units, one, going to some diehards in Japan, but two, also being exported out of Japan. So the Xbox Series also sold around 3,070 units, and the PS4 still holding in strong there, 35 units being sold. Now, as you guys can see, we're going to go over the top 10, and we're going to get into exactly the nitty gritty with Dragon Quest. You guys can see the top 10 right here. Pretty much all Nintendo Switch games, but Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake, obviously with that 180,000. Mario and Luigi Brothership, that was a point of topic discussing the fading of the Nintendo Switch, which is still a thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, yes, Switch is on its way out, but Mario and Luigi Brothership still another 15,000 units. 78,000 plus. It's definitely going to be 100,000 plus seller, and we'll see how it does worldwide overall. Also want to shout out that Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven is doing good at that 96,000 units plus, not including digital, on the Nintendo Switch by itself, plus there's the other versions of the game. And big love to Luigi's Mansion 3 making it back into the top 10 out of nowhere with another 4,445 units. Now, let's talk about this when it comes to Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake, proving exactly what I've been talking about. I talked about how the sales of it, like the update that we had previously, and the sales of Dragon Quest are shaping what we're going to get with the next Dragon Quest game. It's great to see that Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake has already sold this much, and pretty much this is the best-selling game in Japan already for the year, just with this right here. So that's awesome to see. Fans have been waiting for this game. Obviously, it's probably been affecting some other games as well a bit. Some people feel that it might be affecting Mario and Luigi, which is understandable. But yeah, this is a huge event in Japan. Dragon Quest is big, and even on hardware as ancient as the Nintendo Switch, as you can see, there's still a big thirst for this type of game to be played anywhere that you want. Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake doing well over 500,000 in unit retail sales in Japan, not including the digital, is going to shape what we're seeing, what Dragon Quest and what Square Enix wants to do in the future. Look at these sales numbers here. If you don't have the Nintendo Switch here, I don't know if sales are driven as high as they are because of the unique blend of the hybrid system and people, how they play games in Japan. Now, Square Enix is obviously looking at this and saying, okay, Japan, Dragon Quest is number one. Pretty much it's a Japan first type of thing, and they don't want to mess it up overall. And if you look at Square Enix too as well, a lot of the PlayStation 5 exclusive stuff hasn't worked out for them in the past. They've already stated that they are moving away from the singular platform type of thing. They're going to go more multi-platform. They're absolutely trying to position Dragon Quest 12, that game, as something to where it can be big multi-platform, but it probably isn't going to only be on the Nintendo Switch, or maybe there is no Switch version. I think that maybe they're positioning it for a Nintendo Switch 2 type of thing, because look at these sales numbers. They don't want to risk it only having it on PlayStation, or the big version of the game only on PlayStation, like what happened with the PlayStation 4, where things are actually even a bit more dire for Sony in Japan than where the PlayStation 4 was back in 2017 when Dragon Quest XI originally launched. But if you look at what happened afterwards with Dragon Quest XI-S, Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition, and how well that did on the Nintendo Switch 2 years later, I think the writing was on the wall there, in addition to what we're seeing right here. I think that Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake sales, in terms of how big they've been here at this point, is going to make sure, or ensure, that the next Dragon Quest game, the next big one, is absolutely going to probably be Nintendo Switch 2. We'll see if they make a Switch version of the game. I think it's also going to be PlayStation 5. Maybe we get an Xbox version and PC, but I think that Nintendo Switch 2 is absolutely in the works, and it's one of the big reasons why we haven't seen the game up at this point. I think that Nintendo and Square Enix want to announce this game, or re-announce this game together as part of the Nintendo Switch 2, I would say, agenda, or Nintendo Switch 2 launch type of explosion or boost, or whatever you want to say with it. This is something that Square Enix and Nintendo have done for decades now with Dragon Quest games, from even Dragon Quest XI to Dragon Quest X to other handheld or portable Dragon Quest titles, Dragon Quest IX being a DS game, and all of the Dragon Quest remakes. Now, what else does this mean for the Dragon Quest franchise? Well, the success of Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake is obviously great for Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD-2D Remake coming out sometime next year, but it also gives us hope for other Dragon Quest remakes to come back. There are a lot of DS exclusive remakes of some of the other Dragon Quest games that are very underrated in the franchise. If they can HD 2D remake a lot of those games too, that would be very good, and obviously Dragon Quest fans would love that as well, because there are some games that are just stuck on the Nintendo 3DS, the remakes, and we need to see those games come over. So this success of this game here is also great for future Dragon Quest games. Now, the producer of Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake also stated that he was looking forward to, or wants to do, Final Fantasy VI HD 2D Remake. Well, big massive sales like this for Dragon Quest III, which is one of the most, I would say, famous games in Japanese history in terms of overall debut sales, over 3 million units back in the day. When it comes down to it, I think that Final Fantasy VI could have a massive launch as well and make Square Enix a ton of money. And yes, these games, while they look like they maybe don't cost too much to make, they actually are pretty pricey. It takes them years and years of development to get it done, according to the producer, but I think it's well worth it now that you see that you can sell 1 million plus copies at $60, at the $60 price range, and make a ton of money right off the bat. And this is just beginning just in Japan. We still have worldwide sales where Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake is doing decent enough as well. So I do see them kind of shaping things with this, and it's something that I've been talking about for quite some time now with Dragon Quest and Nintendo and the sales, but finally we actually have some of the hard numbers, not the whole worldwide numbers, and definitely not everything, because we're not including digital here, which is a factor. Not as big in Japan when it comes down to the digital sales. You won't see most of the time digital sales usurp the physical sales, but still a factor. I would say at least 20% or so of the overall sales. So I do think that this is great to see that Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake is doing so well, and I think that it's going to shape a lot of things going forward in the future, how Dragon Quest, how Nintendo, Square Enix, and how they announce and what they do going forward. But yeah, good stuff to Dragon Quest III. I cannot wait to dive in now that I am completely done, well, at least my first playthrough of Metaphor ReFantazio, 160 hours. So look forward to my 100% review coming up, or 160 hour plus review coming up very soon here. Now, what do you guys think about this? Let me know in the comment section, but we are going to move on to the next topic with some more data on Japan, and just, I would say people might think this is good or bad based on things, but in Japan, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is now the best-selling Pokemon game of all time. Yes, you heard that right. So Nintendo Switch is home to some of the best-selling Pokemon games, but obviously Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, definitely a controversial game overall because of how it launched with some of the bugs and the glitches and the graphics not being so good and a host of issues. But they've been able to weather the storm a little bit, not completely. Still, the frame rate and stuff like that isn't great, but they've been able to do a number of patches and continue to sell the game over the course of time. Now, the latest update of sales on the game just shows how important the Pokemon franchise is over there in Japan. So Famitsu is reporting that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has surpassed 8.3 million units in Japan. So Pokemon Scarlet and Violet combined are now the best-selling games in the region ever for the Pokemon franchise. The previous record holder, Pokemon Red and Green, and now at this point, finally after decades, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has broke the eternal Pokemon Red and Green in Japan. So some people might be thinking, especially if you're kind of like on the outside looking in, or if you just saw the debacle that happened back in 2022 about this game. And here's the thing that I would say with this. I think that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has continued to sell well. Yes, there are issues, and I've talked about those a million times. You guys know how I feel about it. I think that it was a shame, and I wish that things were better overall, and hopefully they're going to get better when it comes to what Nintendo does in the future with Pokemon games. They still haven't shown us Pokemon Legends ZA, so that tells me that they are very conscious of how people perceive it when they see it, because usually they let us know faster than this. But anyway, getting back to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I think that a lot of the people that are buying the game now at this point are seeing some of the stuff that their friends talk about, or that they're seeing some of the stuff that's online when it comes to content creators, when it comes to the actual Pokemon gathering, battling, trading, like the online features, Terra Battle raids, and things like that. That's what's really helping to push this game past the sales numbers that you're seeing at this point. Because, yeah, there are issues with the single player and the graphics and all that, but if you're playing for the community aspect, if you're playing for the collection aspect of it, there's nothing else on the market quite like Pokemon. Nothing really kind of fills that void. And I would say that the people that are talking about, like, let's say the in-depth analysis of the story and some of the stuff like with Area Zero at the end, those are the type of things that are helping push the sales if people are wondering why it's continuing to do so well despite all of the issues. So it's one of those things to where, yeah, there's a lot of bad, but the good stuff in the game doesn't outweigh the bad overall, but the good stuff is so good, people just want to experience it and are willing to kind of live with the issues that it has. Now, I've played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I did beat the game. I did the DLC stuff and all of that. And yeah, the performance is definitely not good at all. But I would say that out of the single player experience and some of the game loop and the story and what they've done there, it's absolutely one of the best mainline games just for that aspect, compared to the previous ones. I haven't had as much fun with the single player experience in a normal dual release one outside of Pokemon Legends. Guys, we're not counting Pokemon Legends Arceus, but outside of that, I haven't had as much fun with the game since like the 5th gen, since like Pokemon Black and White. Like, it's been that long because I wasn't in love with X and Y story. It was okay, but I wasn't in love with it. I think Pokemon Sword and Shield, obviously, some of the other ones, Pokemon Sun and Moon and all of that type of stuff, didn't really get to me the way that this one did. They did a great job with the story. They did a great job with the gameplay loop. and they did a great job with some of the aspects, and obviously like the online when it comes to like the terror raid battles and some of the other things. Like the online competitive play is very good, the different tournaments that you have, the items, the Pokemon, the competitive nature, like all that stuff is really good. So I think that's why the game has continued to sell really well even post that. There's been nobody that's been able to come in and make a game that's quite like it. So I think that's the reason why it's continuing to sell. But hopefully, once again, it's a lesson learned, because I still feel that if this game actually launched in not a terrible state like it did, and it had better press and publicity and ran better overall, I think that these sales could have even been well higher than what it is right now. It's very good, but I think it could have been a bit higher. Not like, oh my gosh, crazy higher, like it did like double what it's doing right now, but I still think that it could have been a bit higher if it did run a bit better and there wasn't so much negative publicity on the game from the jump, and still to this day in some degrees. So what do you guys think overall with all the different sales and different stuff that we went over today with Pokemon in addition to Dragon Quest? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch RPG videos and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.